May 13th, 1884. Dear Mr. Hickman, after all the kindness you have shown me, I'm honored to grant your request of exchanging letters. It's the very least I can do to show my gratitude. If I can bring you even the slightest bit of comfort, information, or amusement through our correspondence, I am very pleased to do it. Your friend, Miss Lottie, visited me, just as you said she would. Miss Lottie and her ladies are quite the bunch, aren't they? Thank you for arranging everything. Oh, and Miss Lottie begged me to apologize for not keeping her word to you about bringing back my wedding gown. She said every one of her ladies insisted on trying it on at least once before she could return it. Apparently, they've never seen fine city sewing before. In case you're worried on my account, don't be. I don't mind them keeping the dress one bit. It may be the finest dress I've ever constructed, but it only reminds me of what a greenhorn I was coming out here to marry a perfect stranger in the first place. On the bright side, it's free advertising at its best for my dress boutique, so I have no intention of asking for it back any time soon. After a few weeks under Miss Lottie's employ, I've grown quite fond of our mutual friend. She is jolly and generous, and her creative energy is abundant. To say the least, even if, between you and me, it should be restrained ever so slightly, simply for taste's sake. However, she seems to have an inexhaustible fortune at her disposal for funding her vaudeville shows. She has offered me regular work creating the customary for her ladies at Le Petit Chateau de Versailles. She said she changes themes quarterly and has been dying to create a Rococo-themed show for her ladies to perform. Since I'm the first dressmaker capable of doing her grand vision justice, she's ready to spare no expense to see it done. I fully intend to have my hands full the next few months, fitting up each girl in her very own Rococo-inspired can-can dress. Have you ever seen one of Miss Lottie's shows, Mr. Hickman? I hear they are extravagant, but not too terribly vulgar. Even the respectable people of Frisco attend them. I've seen her posters all over town and in the town crier, and I think as vaudeville shows go, hers are quite harmless. My mamma loved theater of any kind. She would have loved working on Miss Lottie's show. It's times like these I miss her terribly, especially when I'm so far away from my sister. My mother was a very kind, practical, and wise woman. While some would look down on my working for Miss Lottie, Mamma likely would have said something like, "Lil, my lass, a girl has got to eat, as long as you steer clear of folly and stay right before the Lord. There's no harm in having a bit of fun now and then." And let me tell you, Mr. Hickman, I am having a great deal of fun realizing Miss Lottie's vision. Thank you again for helping me find the work that will eventually bring Katie and me together again. I'm not such a novice that I don't know the vast array of less desirable work I could have been forced into under the circumstances. I am entirely in your debt. And as it stands, this isn't all I've have to be thankful for. Your assistance has led to a respectable place to live as well. One of Miss Lottie's ladies introduced me to her cousins Esther and Abigail DeMille. Their family runs a boarding house just past the charcoal kilns on the edge of town. Outside of private residences, it seems to be the only truly respectable establishment in all of Frisco. The DeMilles are a Mormon family, so imagine my surprise when I learned that Mr. DeMille only has one wife. From all the talk in the papers and the rumors one hears about Utah, one would think he'd have at least 7. I've made great friends with Esther and Abigail. They're both grand, lovely, strong-minded girls. At present, I teach them sewing in exchange for room and board. Their father is keen on them being as independent as possible, and is especially anxious they are always able to provide for themselves and their families, should the need arise. I like that about him. There's precious little work of a respectable nature for a woman to do and actually support herself. Mr. DeMille is a surprisingly forward-thinking man, where his daughters and women in general are concerned. In fact, he's extremely proud of the fact that the very first woman to vote in all of America was a woman in Salt Lake City. I was under the impression that the first woman to vote came from the Wyoming Territory, but Esther showed me proof otherwise. I've included the same for you to send to your mother. After discussing her work with the women's rights movement in length with you on the train, I thought she might appreciate it. I still can hardly believe she met Lucretia Mott in person. What a grand treat that must have been. There was a town meeting held last Friday. The DeMilles invited me along since I intend to stay here at least as long as it takes to repay all Mr. Gambit's money. I know you don't think I should have to because he was the one who turned out to be the thief. But I'm afraid I'll feel obliged to him until I do. We Moors don't like feeling obliged in general, and particularly to men like Mr. Gambit. In all honesty, I only answered his ad to save my sister, so he may not be the gentleman I believed him to be, but I am not entirely innocent in this debacle either. My Irish pride will allow me to admit that much, at least. As to the town meeting, it was called by the concerned fathers of Frisco. Their complaint was about the various corpses one finds strewn through the streets each morning after the gambling and drinking and pistol whipping are over. It is shocking, you know. The tales of the Wild West may have always thrilled me, but I've only been here a few weeks, and already I've encountered more than half a dozen poor, expired souls on my way to Miss Lottie's or to church. By the end of the meeting, any who could afford it had donated money to hire a man and a wagon to go around town and clean up the dead before the children set out for school each morning. They even discussed finally hiring a sheriff from Nevada if things get too bad. I can't help asking myself what their definition of too bad is. How much worse can things possibly get? Standards and whatnot, I suppose. Now, Mr. Hickman, if all I've shared hasn't been enough to enlighten and entertain you, I will now tell you the latest rumor around town, that Frisco has acquired its very own specter. They say it's a woman. She's said to wear white and wander the foothills of Frisco on foggy evenings. Aren't ghost stories deliciously thrilling? I don't believe a stitch of them, of course, but it's always a corker to have a little Mephistophelian chill before bed, just to curdle one's blood. No, I am not morbid, Mr. Hickman. I simply relish the keener sensibilities one needs now and then to remind myself that I am alive. And now, my dear benefactor, I would very much like to hear all you wish to share about yourself. I feel I've spent so much of our time together monopolizing the conversation with my woes and need of your assistance. Furthermore, I had no idea you were a Pinkerton until the train robbery. So, being of an insatiably curious nature, I would very much like to hear all about how you came to be one. And, of course, any adventures you have chasing the bright stars that you care to pepper your letters with will also be lavishly and repeatedly savored. Oh dear, and speaking of the bright stars, I must apologize to you. Miss Lottie told me that they were the women who helped me that first night in Frisco. How I wish I could have alerted you to their presence and saved you from chasing them all over the territory. In all honesty, I wouldn't have guessed it was them in a million years. They were so lovely, and all three of them were extremely kind to me. They certainly didn't strike me as the murderous thieves their wanted posters around town proclaimed them to be. Then again, I was fooled by Mr. Gambit as well, so I suppose I'm not an entirely credible judge of character. In the meantime, I do hope you are taking great care wherever you are. I was delighted by your gift of the map. I will take an inordinate amount of pleasure keeping track of your travels by it. Until your next letter, I remain gratefully yours, Miss Lily Clara Moore.